Hey, everybody, welcome to the Particle Accelerator Podcast, where we talk to future thinking business leaders about how to grow their team and accelerate their business. I'm here today with Jeff Jones. Jeff, will you introduce yourself?
Thank you. Yes, I am a supply chain guy through and through. I've been doing it for more years than I care to remember. When I fell into supply chain, that click of troubleshooting process and technology just gelled for me. So I learned as much about it as I could. And through the years, I still try and keep a finger on what's going on and try and leverage technology to make life a little bit easier wherever possible. Most recently, director of warehousing, director of S&OP at a few different places, supply chain consulting, senior manager for Hitachi Consulting, among others, and quite a few other projects that we don't have time to get into, I wouldn't think.
One of the ways I like to get to know people is I love to ask, what was your first job? For me, it was a paper route. What was it for you? How'd you make your first dollar?
My first dollar was raking leaves in my neighborhood. We needed to make money for whatever we were doing at the time, as kids do. So I would solicit by knocking on the doors of neighbors' houses. And I grew up in Pennsylvania. That's hardwood country. So there were quite a few leaves to be raked.
Yeah, it's a renewable resource for sure. Kind of like washing dishes in a restaurant. You wash them up real good once, they'll just dirty them again. So you have job security in that. It's cool. What toy or hobby did you have as a child that inspired what you do career-wise today?
I would say documentaries and understanding how things work have always interested me, whether that's the mechanical understanding of the things that I was working with or playing with, or just the educational nature of subjects that I had no knowledge of prior. You have things on or listening on NPR or watching on educational TV. And with the advent of podcasts, the opportunity to go deep down the hole and learn how things work is even more now.
I'm inspired by these people who document like a skill in a year. The first one I recognized, or I think the person who popularized it, was like table tennis or ping pong. They invested a full year, 15 minutes a day into practicing ping pong. The thesis is that if you spend 15 to 30 minutes a day on any new skill for a year, then at the end of the year, you'd be in the top 1% in that particular skill. I've also seen people do it with jump rope or whatever. And then just seeing what my kids are able to do with a couple of YouTube videos and some diligence is pretty impressive.
That's fantastic. I have professional topics I should be doing that with and personal topics.
That's right. AI prompt engineering strikes me as one that everybody should be doing a deep dive on.
For sure.
Well, what was your favorite and least favorite course in school?
Let's see. My favorite was history. Not surprisingly, based on things I've already told you that I enjoy, understanding historical elements, particularly the labor era of the U.S. history. Least favorite was probably algebra and geometry. I had convinced myself that I wasn't any good at math. And it's almost like my subconscious was trying to reconfirm that status as I went through class. It wasn't until I went back to school in graduate school that I realized, hey, this isn't that bad, actually. But it still wasn't my favorite in grade school.
What quote from a famous person lives in your mind rent-free?
Mike Tyson. Everybody's got a plan until they get hit in the jaw.
For sure. One of my CEO coach, he has a famous line. He's a Green Beret. And the way he says the same thing is everybody wants to be a gangster till it's time to do gangster stuff. Doesn't necessarily use the word stuff, but you get my meaning. It's the same general idea. We all say we would die for our families until it takes, but that means giving up personal time and not being quite as comfortable. Then we find out really what we're made of. Yeah, I love that quote. What do you think the greatest invention or discovery in the past 300 years has been?
In the past 300, obviously the advent of our digital economy. The internet itself has created lots of opportunities that we take for granted. It's just a given. I can find an answer to any question off of my phone or even watch now that took us our Encyclopedia Britannica back in the day. It's amazing what we can get access to. So I would say the advent of the internet and computers in general has really exploded.
What tech trend significantly impacted your industry and how did your company respond?
From a meld of technology and supply chain there, the bullwhip effect was in clear evidence in recent years. As the pandemic hit and we saw demand go down, and then we saw it come back so strongly, in 2020 and 2021, the folks that had visibility to these kinds of trends before were not surprised when we saw the trough on the other side of that wave that broke. The ability to see data and visualize it quicker than ever before has been one of the more interesting and rewarding experiences of the past few years, because everybody that knows supply chain knew it was coming. You could see this coming a mile away. It's like the Pareto principle. You hear about it a lot, but not until you actually use your numbers and see it come through are you as impressed as you eventually will be. The technology now that's able to create intuitive thoughts and get into the meat of the issue quicker than before without all the necessary structured data that needs to be done in reformatting. It's been exceptional to see that kind of stuff in motion and see classic principles in new ways.
Yeah, that's really cool. What kind of tech has your company been using to see that coming? One of my good friends has been fairly outspoken, a guy named Joel Neeb. He's been really talking about that this is the insight age, that data now has become, we've heard the cliche, data is the new gold, but I've seen it with a lot of my clients where the folks that invested over the past couple of years in making their data available to them, like we work with a hearing aid manufacturer, and they took all their hearing aid test data over many years, anonymized it, and started trying to figure out, hey, what really drives somebody from a test where, hey, your hearing's not that great, to actually getting support for it through devices. Now they are able to pinpoint like, yep, this person will buy hearing aid. This is the perfect model for them. This is what, and really winning the brand war because now they understand their data. Once a person has a brand of hearing aid that they enjoy working with, they're set for life. There's a lock-in and brand loyalty as you experience the tech and get used to it. Apple enjoys that quite a bit. So what are you guys leveraging to endure those cycles, and how are you getting those insights?
One of the neatest recent projects we've been able to use technology for is a network redesign. I used a company called LogHub, which is, of course, a hosted subscription service for supply chain problems. We plugged in all the manufacturing sites we had, all our customers, the frequency of shipments from each of those, as well as what our future forecasts were looking to do. And with that information, we were then able to generate center of gravity type calculations to say, hey, if you're thinking of putting a new warehouse in or extending your network, put it here or put it there. And maybe these locations aren't the best use of your company's assets. It was fantastic. A really neat way to get to the heart of the matter quick. And then you've got relevant data that you can use and you can also play with. Anybody that's gotten down the path of sales and operations planning has heard the term what if scenario planning. It used to take a lot of work to get to that level, and not that many people were able to leverage the things that they learned through that. With technology they had in LogHub and other similar tools, we were able to say, hey, what if I set someplace up in Utah? What if I set up something up around San Francisco? And if I did, what would it look like? We were able to run through those types of scenarios and have the aha moments that we could then share with our executive team. We could show them the data and where it came from. So it was no longer because Jeff's got a hunch. It's not, I've got a good feeling about this. It was like, here's the numbers, here's what it would do, here's the implications of it. And it just made for quite a different value proposition. It was helpful.
Yeah, that's really cool. In manufacturing, one of my previous guests works in water treatment. He's an environmental engineer, and they call it a digital twin. So if I had all of my historical data, I could tweak a number and see what would have happened. And then you're using some modern ML to forecast the reaction to those changes. And then we work with another client that's trying to make that super efficient, where you can run many models against they call it a DEM, where that's encapsulated so you could run multiple scenarios off the same. You wouldn't have to go back to source data as often. It's a lot faster.
Yeah, no, that's great. It's exactly the kind of thing I'm talking about. Even the point of sale data, the availability now is so much better than it ever was before. Not all the projects I work on have a retail aspect to them, but I can see in other areas where people are leveraging the heck out of it to a good extent.
Are there interesting for supply chain? I would imagine data sets becomes an issue because you may just consider, okay, I have all the data with me that I'm going to need, but then weather problems, external factors, even geoeconomic factors could play in. How is that approached in these solutions that you're thinking about?
Right now, we're talking roughly causal forecast. Something that has a strong bearing on that particular event. It used to be that we were dealing with time series analysis. It's all in demand planning. That's all anybody cared about. It's all anybody had that was relatively clean. And usually you were dealing with shipping data, which is not the same thing as order data, because what I ship to a customer is not necessarily what they wanted to buy. It's just what I had available to sell. So you're dealing with a naturally constrained demand signal. Beyond that, the basic premise is what I've done historically bears a resemblance to what I'm going to do in the future. And I don't think anybody can say that we're not setting precedents everywhere in the data you see in the markets right now. Being able to have that kind of a causal relationship and understanding how it fits is huge. I'm seeing lots of opportunities to use those kinds of fuzzy logic to make those linkages. Before, you needed to figure out what the causation was and to the degree, and it was an actuarial nightmare, to be honest, to figure that out. Now with the ability to say, hey, Mr. AI bot, here's a whole chunk of data, here's what actually happened, here's what's going on, show me how they relate, and it generates it for you. You got a completely different mindset, a completely different way of forecasting and predicting corners in your data is what I call it. And that's what it's all about. Being able to say things are going to be differently in the future, and here's why, and here's the degree of confidence I have in that. Really exciting, but it doesn't get you away from this conversation that it generates. It doesn't take the human element out of it to be able to make those ties, to be able to explain, here's what the information I have, and here's why you should care about it. All the same skills that we needed before with regards to interacting with folks are as important now as they were then.
Yeah, totally. And I think data is also far too siloed within various corporations. Like the shipping vendors don't give their product loss data as it correlates. I'm just making something up. They don't give that out. They think that's something they need to keep super secret. And I think it will be really interesting to see how that shifts as data could be a purchasable asset sooner. So rather than, okay, I've collected all this data, I know when to run my shipping routes and when to not run them based on weather patterns. Now I'm going to share that out and people are going to subscribe to that. I think there's a missing opportunity for data sharing that'll probably come through the scientific community first, I would hope. There's a lot of data that's being hidden because I'm not supposed to share any of my data. And while I would agree, don't share your data about your customers, keep that private. Right. There may be so much operational data that you could end up adding 40, 50% to revenue, and you already have it. And sharing it doesn't necessarily require a whole lot, maybe some tech resources to make it available to data customers, but not really anything that you wouldn't otherwise want to have around. So I think that'll be interesting.
And I think that's a great insight. And to use those intuitive hunches that you have just to be able to make that first step so people can understand what you're talking about. Hey, I happen to marry this housing start data that I purchased at a nominal price in our product sales, and look at what came out. It's not like that took a great leap of logic to get to it from a lot of manufacturers, but nobody had gone through the trouble. Yeah, I'm with you. I think it's a great idea.
Yeah, I think we're going to see a lot of sales strategies in the future. It doesn't make any sense for me just to hoard this, but I could really make some money with it. And it might even benefit some adjacent industry that's not even a competitive advantage to me.
I don't really know who's going to be able to benefit from this. Let's see.
Yeah, totally. I think a data marketplace of sorts. I have an online advertising background and we've been talking about this stuff for 20 years.
Direct marketing.
But I think corporations have an opportunity. Let me ask you, what are 3 technology innovations you're betting on to drive your business growth?
Right now, I'm doing some independent consulting work. The things that are driving me now aren't the same as what I drove a year ago. but I'm using AI for a lot of things now. I'm using it for relationship management or even to get the basic draft or initial constructs for communications with potential customers, as well as folks in my area as I network. There's a technology leap being made now. We talked about a lot earlier in this conversation in terms of making connections that weren't readily evident before. I think the user interface to support that kind of data is now at a place where more people are going to have access to it. I'm expecting a lot in the demand management S&OP area. And I'll probably get involved more with from a networking perspective as we look at large capital asset decisions and the footprints for businesses.
What do you think the most significant gaps between where you hope we would be with some of the things you've been seeing and the realities of today? Where do you think the gap is in the market that you would like to see filled?
Shout out to one of my former colleagues, Vince Collier, did some work with the use cases for AI, finding a way to say, hey, this is how we can use AI around supply chain. I don't think that there's enough people thinking those kinds of ways. It's like when cell phones first came out and before they were as smart as they are now, people said, yeah, that's great. I can just make them smaller and put them in my pocket. Why should I care? It wasn't until people started opening their eyes up to different things they could do with it, different access and different use cases from both a professional and a personal perspective, that we saw the explosion of mobile computing like we did. I think people trying to think about what's next in terms of solid return on investment use cases for the technology we already have is where I see real opportunity. Hopefully I can help close some of those gaps, but even if it's not me, I still want to see us get better at it, leverage the technology we have available to us.
I also love the idea of companies putting out an AI use policy, whether it be a privately hosted large language model. We've seen that coming out of Facebook with Llama, and it's benchmarking really well. So you could host it on your own hardware. You have a large company, you probably don't want to pay Claude or ChatGPT individual licenses, but you could privatize one and secure it on your local network and say, here it is. We've embedded some guardrails in there, which I would recommend that they do. Even if you're a small company and you want to get the ChatGPT questions, here's some use cases that you should be using it for: helping you draft emails, helping you write marketing copy, and making sure that's clear, but then also having a feedback form. If you think of something else, please let us know.
Oh, that's a great idea.
These folks are going to generate tons of ideas. And we've also been seeing that certain data that you may be having, unstructured data, doesn't necessarily have to be leveraged to retrain your private model. That's expensive and it takes a lot of time. You have to have like highly specialized people to help you do that. But we've been doing these like vector embeddings, which is just providing a little bit of structure to the unstructured data, aligning it to some taxonomies in the user queries. And that vector embedding strategy, totally Googleable term, has been, we can have a vector embed strategy available in 90 days that might be like all your products and services, put those in a vector database. Even if you have thousands of SKUs, somebody says, hey, I want this kind of product or service done this way. Do you do that? And then leverage the language model to fashion an answer back. Yes, we do that very well.
Is that kind of a broad indexing of that?
That's right. You take your structured data, you use the LLM to structure it a little bit in the vector database and index it. And then you are able to query the vector database. Pinecone is a great tool for this. They're at the forefront of creating these vector databases. And you could have something like that ready with a small data team in 90 days, and you don't have to do any retraining. So you don't need the hardware capacity to do that. If you want to leverage your proprietary data, you can create these vector sidecars and sit them alongside a language model and be very happy with the result.
That's really neat. You've given me something to Google when we get off of this.
Oh, good. Yeah. One question I'll ask you, how do you, since you're senior manager and a consultant, how do you approach risk when implementing a new cutting edge technology?
That's a great point. And I think that risk management needs to be top of the mind, even when we're not running out of toilet paper or having a major supply chain event. Thinking through what are the things that we could do if it were just inadvertent? And then thinking, what if someone was actively trying to create challenges for us? What would they do? How would they do it? It's simply a risk that people aren't addressing seriously enough these days. Just having a strong fishing and filtering barracuda model is not what we're talking about here. You got to think a bit more creatively, because there's certainly enough nefarious actors out there who are.
For sure. We recommend pen testing. We have a great little team that does pen testing on applications. Even the developers are really focused on features. They don't necessarily think about, okay, are all the users and roles sharing the right information, even if it's between, say, a mobile app and a server-side application. Every time I've pen tested a client solution, I've learned something. A pen testing partner can be a great person to just have in your back pocket and say, hey, could you just take a look at this and make sure it does what I think it does? So I think that's great. Just keeping that eye towards risk is important. What lessons have you learned from a tech initiative or any business initiative that failed to deliver expected value?
The initial fear, there's so many of the folks that I'll end up working with are afraid to get into some of the areas because it's so far out of their comfort zone or so far out of what they've already done. And you lay the path for them to say, all right, here's the way we're going to start looking at this. Here's the methodology in a broad term. Let's talk about ways that we can get into this, and then we can relate it to things that they've done before. And once they realize it's just technology like any other project, it brings their walls down a bit. And then they're open to new ideas and trying new things, because that mindset of curiosity, of not fear, but let's see what it can do. Let's see what possible solutions we can generate, or even if I don't have a fix, this is what I'm looking to accomplish. I just want to learn as much as I can about it. That's going to elevate the whole team's understanding. The next thing, you've got your advocate with the seat at the table. You've got somebody who you can bounce ideas off of. And once everybody starts getting in that mindset that they trust the people that they're working with and they understand the technology well enough that they're not scared of it, everybody starts elevating it and finding new ways to use it, like you had mentioned earlier in our conversation.
Yeah, we have the pleasure to work on a lot of RPA projects, robotic process automation. Essentially, you write scripts to do stuff that there's just not APIs available. So the way businesses would typically tackle it would be to sit some butts in some seats and have them data enter, stare and compare, left screen, right screen type stuff. And the folks that tie to that really care about accuracy. That becomes what drives them is accuracy. And so as we've done these RPA projects, there's been tons of resistance because you're going to take away our job. The robot is going to do it. Maybe it won't do it right. And so what we found is that if we incentivize the robot attendant, the person working in conjunction with the robot, if we say, hey, we're still going to incentivize you based on total orders processed. So you're going to get credit for everything that the bots do. You're still responsible for accuracy. So we want you to tattletale on them as much as possible. We want you to give us all the feedback about what they're not doing right. We don't necessarily want you to tell us exactly how they should do it, because we may do it differently in the robot world than you would in the human world. But once we tied that you're still responsible for quality, so we can't live without you, and we're going to incentivize you based on total output, those programs tend to go very well. But organizations that kind of fail to deliver that clear message, they end up struggling with user adoption, because it's always like, those bots are threatening me.
So essentially, you're just adding a new actor into a standard RACI type diagram, right?
Hey, that's right.
The R can be this bot instead of Joe, Tom, or Sally.
If your feedback helps them to operate accurately, you're just going to crush life. We have some other things that we haven't been able to get to because you guys are staring and comparing, copy and pasting all day. When you get that mind shift, people tend to love that this is an extra equipment. These are power tools that I get to be involved with building and using. How do you cultivate a culture of innovation and technical fluency in organizations that you work with?
I make sure and establish the terminology. As easy as it is, let's make sure we're all using the same terms in the same way to mean the same things. So establish that and be able to provide that in a central location so that people can learn on their own, thinking about things in the same way is a starting point. It's a building block. And then I ask questions. I ask a lot of questions similar to the way it sounds like you interact with folks. I'll say, what are you going to do about it? What are your thoughts on what might be driving this? Or how could that have happened given what we've seen in the past? Have them make those ties together so that you're not asking yes or no questions. You're not asking something that you could have pulled off the data mart directly. Be open and receptive to the things that come back. I'm not smart enough to know all the things that they're going to run into or all the challenges they're going to face. It's exciting to hear new, different ways and new challenges that each one of the folks I work with encounter. So thinking about it in a logical, straightforward approach and being more of a servant leader versus a do this, do that kind of person. That's been what's helped and resonated with the folks that have worked with me through the years.
I just read the 3 laws of performance. Like, people perform according to what occurs to them. And the way you unlock new levels of performance is by speaking in future language. What experience could you share to people, or maybe lessons learned you could share with people beginning their digital transformation journey or just starting their supply chain career?
Don't let the perfection be the enemy of good enough. Get started. You're not going to be perfect at everything right away. Don't have that expectation. Jump in with both feet. Just dip your toe in the water. That's what it takes to get you moving. You're going to develop momentum if you find it interesting and rewarding. Don't be afraid to take that first step or that first stroke.
If people like what you've had to share today, how would you like them to connect with you?
First off, please feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn, SCM Jones on LinkedIn. Also, shoot me an email. I would love to hear what you have to share. My email address, I think, as you pointed out at the beginning, is pnwjjones@gmail.com. And I'd love to hear about the new and exciting ways that you're using technology.
Thanks, man. It's been great. Appreciate you being with me.
Yeah, likewise. Thanks for reaching out and creating the opportunity to do this.
No, my pleasure.